Blog Talk Radio.
Hello.
Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. Broadcasting live presents Two Guys and a Bible with Don Preston and William Bell. Join us each week at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central as we bring you exciting, sound, challenging, and comforting messages regarding the end times. Thank you for tuning in today. Don Preston is the founder of Preterist Research Institute, or PRI. Don is a prolific author, having written and published 19 books, a host of audio and DVD studies, and is a debater and defender of the full preterist view. His websites are BibleProphecy.com, Eschatology.org, and DonKPreston.com. William Bell is the founder of AllThingsFulfilled.com Ministries and has a website bearing the same name, and has authored 3 books, audios, and DVDs. He has published hundreds of articles and recordings. And now, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Two Guys and a Bible broadcast with Don Preston and William Bell.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Two Guys and a Bible here on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute, as the intro said there. And once again, William Bell is not with us this evening. He should be. I haven't heard from him, to be honest about it, but he should be wrapping up, starting to wrap up his trip to Ghana and getting ready to come home. And as I said last week, can't hardly wait to get him back here and to get a full report on how the trip has gone. As I've said before, this is just a tremendously exciting activity that William is involved in. And before I go on, let me just say, folks, if the mic goes dead for a moment or two here, you'll just have to forgive me. I had a severe bout with reflux, pardon me, that seemed to come out of absolutely nowhere a few moments ago, just before coming on the air. I won't. I will spare you all the gory details, but it was not pleasant at all. And needless to say, my vocal cords are not liking or appreciating at all, what happened. And so I'm having a great deal of difficulty speaking, and I'm hoping that I've already used my respirator. I've taken a couple of reflux pills, and so I'm very hopeful that here in just a couple of moments that my throat will clear up and I won't be having any further difficulty. But I can tell you at the present moment, it's very, very difficult for me to speak. I feel like I could have another really bad round of reflux just any moment now. I have a pail sitting here next to me, and have water, and I have Tums, and I have my respirator, and so hopefully I'm all set. But I just hope I don't have to use all that stuff. And again, I do apologize, but that just came out of nowhere. I had eaten supper. Wonderful supper fixed by my wife, and all of a sudden, boom! It just hit me, and it wasn't all that much of a spicy supper. There was nothing there that would normally give me any problems, and so, like I said, I'm at a little bit of a loss as to what caused this and why it's happened. But it is what it is, and I'm doing the very best that I can. So anyway. As I was saying, what William is doing over there in Ghana is just tremendously exciting. We know that he is a diligent, hard worker, We know that he went over there with in the full knowledge that he was going to hit the ground running, and he wasn't going to stop running and going and teaching and ministering until he got back. And so to use the old cliche, they're going to get their money's worth out of him, even though they're certainly not paying him anything. What William is doing, he is doing because he is dedicated. He is doing it because some generous people have made it possible for him to do that, but he is not receiving a salary. He's not receiving, a big check in order to get over there and to have a vacation, as it were. What William is doing, he is doing out of the dedication and the commitment of his heart, and because of his love for the Lord and the love for the truth. So, oh my goodness. This is really not much fun. So anyway, as I was saying, I'm doing the very best that I can. Hopefully this will clear up here very, very shortly. So I tell you what, it's such, as we've said so many times on this program, this is such an exciting time to be alive. Opportunities like William is taking advantage of, the internet, the continuing growing audience of those interested in hearing the message of fulfillment, just over the last week or so. And I'll be really honest, I haven't even counted them. I don't spend a lot of time counting numbers like that. Perhaps I should. But I don't remember the numbers, but I do know there's been a significant number of people who have contacted me over the last week and a half or so, telling me how excited, how enthused they are about learning the message of fulfillment and covenant eschatology. And it's kind of interesting that just today on Facebook, there was this one individual. He and I have corresponded ever so briefly via email. And by the way, let me digress very, very quickly. If you had tried to contact me through any of my cable1.net emails, then you almost assuredly have not heard from me. I made this announcement a couple of weeks ago, but let me point it out again. Cable One has discontinued all email service provision. They no longer provide it. They told us about that they were going to discontinue it. They said, we're discontinuing it in about 30 days. You've got 30 days to get another account with somebody. And after that, all of your emails on our server will be deleted. They can never be retrieved. Needless to say, I went into almost panic mode, as did countless others. And so I established email addresses on Gmail. And so if you have tried to contact me using the jdon@cable1.net and have not received a response, then you can reach me at Don K. Preston. That's all small letters, no caps. Don K. Preston @gmail.com, and just go to my website, because the email address for contacting me has been changed there. Go to my website, donkpreston.com or BibleProphecy.com, and go over on the right-hand side to where it says contact us, and hit that, and you can send me an email. And so I apologize if you've tried to reach me and have not been able to do so. This was not my choosing, I can assure you, by any stretch of the imagination. And so, again, if you want to reach me and you've tried to use the JDOM, now if you tried to use the DK Pret @cable1.net, the same applies, because that email address is no longer functioning. So if you want to get a hold of me, Don K. donkpreston@gmail.com. And go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com, and on the right-hand side, there's the Contact Us tab. Just click on it, and you can send me an email. So hopefully that will help out. I have noticed that in my jdon@gmail.com, and it's technically jdon 1y1hc, jdon 1y1hc. Well, I have noticed that I have received virtually no emails at that email address over the last week or so. And one of those reasons being is because all of my emails coming from Cable One are no longer being transferred. They're not doing anything whatsoever. So once again, if you want to contact me, then you've got to go through the website or use the Gmail that I proposed to you there a moment ago. So, like I was saying, boy, oh boy, there have been some absolutely fantastic, gratifying, humbling emails that we have received over the last week or so, of individuals that, and I was started to tell about one individual on Facebook. This was on a Facebook page that is dedicated basically to doing nothing but slandering, insulting, condemning covenant eschatology. They indulge in name calling. They engage in the worst sort of sarcasm. They engage in the worst sort of hate speech, if you want to use that terminology. And this one individual showed up, and he was asking some very legitimate questions. He was not using any sarcasm. He was not using any kind of harsh rhetoric. He was not being caustic in any way whatsoever. He was asking good, solid, legitimate questions. And my goodness, he was attacked mercilessly. And so he and I had corresponded ever so briefly in the past. He seemed to be a really, really level-headed type of a guy. He seemed to be sincere. He seemed to be asking very, very good questions. And so when he was doing that on this Facebook page, again, he just got attacked mercilessly. And so today, as I witnessed him being attacked so viciously, I just posted on there to him, and I just told him, I said, well, unfortunately, you have to realize that the folks in charge of this page really see themselves as the grand inquisitors. They don't believe that they have to answer any question whatsoever, that if you ask a question that is based upon a text that demands an AD 70 application, then that must mean you are an advocate of AD 70, and therefore you're a heretic and you're a false teacher. And I said, you have to realize they believe, and they put it into practice, they believe that it's perfectly okay for them to tell outright lies, to blatantly misrepresent what you or others have said, and when they're caught red-handed in those misrepresentations, they feel no remorse, they offer no repentance, they offer no apologies, nothing. So I said, that's the kind of people you're dealing with on this particular Facebook page. And he wrote me back privately, private message, and expressed a great deal of gratitude for the thoughts that I had offered. But, you know, Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 2, 24 and following, a child of God must not strive, but be gentle toward all men. In meekness is instructing those who oppose themselves, that God may grant them repentance unto life. Well, the individuals on this Facebook page do not believe in any of that. They have They have no place for, quote, gentleness. They have no place for decorum. They have no place for respect toward a fellow believer. All they see is if you say anything that lends itself in support of any text toward AD 70, you are a heretic. They will instantly attack you and say, do you support this AD 70 heresy? And if you do, you're not welcome here, or, whatever. And so, I mean, it's really quite appalling to witness what these individuals do on that board, on that Facebook page. But as I have said many times to others on that page, you know for certain, this has been my experience down through the years in countless debates, both informal and formal, that when your opponent feels that it's necessary, and the only answer they can give is to insult you, to question your integrity, to question your standing before the Lord, then you know very good and well that they know they cannot answer your arguments. All they have is arguments of insult. And so that's what we face on a day-by-day basis from the opponents of the truth. So, all of that said, thank you again for joining us, joining me this evening here on Two Guys in a Bible on Fulfilled Radio, a voice you can trust. I want to get back now into our discussion of the Messianic temple and this marvelous text of Zechariah chapter 6, verse 13. Let us be reminded of the context. The historical context is the children of Israel, specifically of Judah, those carried off into Babylonian captivity, have returned. They have been given permission by Xerxes and Artaxerxes to return to Jerusalem and to rebuild the temple. They initially began that work, but then they got discouraged. And as a result of the discouragement, they stopped building the temple. And so Joshua and Zerubbabel went to the people, encouraged them, rebuked them even for not continuing and not finishing the work of rebuilding the temple. The book of Haggai is written at the same time. It is addressing those who were saying, but this temple is not even going to compare with the first temple. Where's the glory of this temple? And so the Lord said in Zechariah chapter 4, do not despise the day of small beginnings. Or who has despised the day of small beginnings? And the Lord made a promise that the time was going to come in which he would glorify his temple. He would build another temple, a greater temple. And Zechariah chapter 6 gives us some insight into that. I've already given some of the background. Again, this is the time of the return from Babylonian captivity. And there were three men, Heldai, Tobijah, and Jedaiah, who returned from Babylon with gold and silver and precious jewels contributed by those who remained in Babylon, but they contributed these things for the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. Now look, we don't know whether those people that contributed those goods said, well, I can't go back right now, but here are 20 shekels. Take it. And when I have the opportunity, then I'm going to return. We don't know everything, but we do know there was a great deal of dedication on the part of those in Babylon to contribute to the rebuilding of the temple. That's what these three men did. They were bringing back their gift or the gifts from Babylon. And so, the word of the Lord came to Zechariah the the prophet, and said, take this silver, take this gold, make an elaborate crown, set it on the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, then speak to him, saying, thus says the Lord of hosts, saying, behold, the man whose name is the branch. Now, look, as I pointed out before, and I'm going to do a bit of repetition tonight before we get off into Hebrews. But all of this is extremely critical to remind us of some of the issues that are involved in Joshua chapter 6. The Lord stands Joshua in front of Zechariah and has Zechariah say to Joshua, behold, the man whose name is the branch, from his place he shall branch out. He shall build the temple of the Lord. And you see, the prophet is speaking to Joshua. He is not speaking about him. He is speaking to him, letting him know that he is a type, a foreshadowing, and a sign of someone else who is coming. That other someone who is coming is the branch. Now, I've already shared enough scriptures with you. I'm not going to go over all of that territory because that would take up too much of my time this evening. But the promise of the branch goes all the way back to Isaiah 11 and other passages of the Lord saying that of the lineage of David, of the house of Jesse, a branch would arise and he would be seated on the throne of David. He would rule over the kingdom of God forever and forever. 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 13 and 14. So hear this marvelous promise of the branch. Now, remember, this is years, 70 years at least, after Jeremiah and the prophecies of the coming of the branch found in Jeremiah chapter 23 and 33. It is literally centuries after the promise of the coming of the branch of Isaiah chapter 11. And so down through Israel's history, both in the history of the 10 northern tribes, history of the 2 southern tribes, there was this prophecy of the coming of the branch of the house of Jesse. Of the tribe of Judah, who would arise and rule and reign. But something remarkable, something very, very remarkable happens in Zechariah chapter 6 and verse 13. Excuse me, folks, I've just got to have a drink of water. Wow. I have to tell you, I'm not very prone to reflux. I have not been in the past, but whew, my goodness, this is really something. Okay. So Zechariah speaks to Joshua and tells him the branch will grow up and he shall sit on the throne in the house of the Lord. He will be king and priest in the temple of the Lord. Verse 13 again. Yes, he shall build the temple of the Lord. He shall bear the glory. He shall sit and rule on the throne. So he shall be a priest on his throne, and the council of peace shall be between them both. Now, I've shared with you a good bit, but this is so important. This situation is absolutely unprecedented. You have to understand, ladies and gentlemen, there had never been a time in Israel's history in which the priest was the king or in which the king was a priest. There had never been that. And to reemphasize what I have said before, not only was this unprecedented, but it was from the perspective of Torah, it was technically illegal. It was unbiblical. Well, why is that? Well, because the king is supposed to be of the tribe of Judah. The priest is supposed to be of the Aaronic lineage, and those two never came together. Okay? If you're going to be the branch, then you are automatically of the tribe of Judah, because that's of the lineage of David. That's just the nature of it. Okay? The branch is from the lineage of David. That's of the tribe of Judah. But let me reemphasize, no one from the tribe of Judah could be a priest. Hebrews chapter 7 makes it more than evident that this was true. And the writer says, Hebrews chapter 7 verse 12, it's evident that our Lord sprang out of Judah, concerning which tribe Moses spake nothing concerning the priesthood. Moses never ever said someone from the tribe of Judah could be a priest. You got to be of the tribe of Levi. So the unprecedented and the staggering thought behind Zechariah chapter 6, and I have to be really honest here, I have never read in any of the ancient Jewish writings how the ancient rabbis resolved this conflict. Now, we do know this. We do know that in ancient Israel, there was a belief that a priest would come, and there was a belief that a king would come. But they saw them as two different people. They also believed that Elijah would come. He's different. So there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of uncertainty in regard to the eschatological expectation and hope of Israel during the first century. And so what we find here in Zechariah chapter 6 had to have been, as I stated last week, it had to have been absolutely stunning. It had to be absolutely challenging for the ancients to read this and to say, okay, wait just a moment. How in the world will this be possible? Priests are of Aaron and Levi. Kings are of Judah. How's this going to work? Now, again, as I stated a moment ago, I have never to this point, and that's probably just a failure on my part, okay? I have never to this point read any rabbinic writings in which any of the ancient rabbis explained this and said, well, the way that this can happen is, yes, one man can be king and priest on the throne because there will be a change in the law. See, that's the kicker here. That is the kicker. If you cannot be a king and a priest on a throne sitting in the temple. Now remember, only the priests are allowed in the temple, folks. And this king, will sit on the throne, and that throne will be in the temple. So there's no question about the conflation of these two personages. It's one person as priest, one person as king, one person sitting on that throne in the temple, serving both as king and as priest. And so, how did the ancients solve that? Well, again, I don't know. Which reminds me, I really, really, really need to send my friend in Israel. I've mentioned many times that I have become good friends with a man in Israel. He is considered one of the very top Hebrew scholars in the world, ladies and gentlemen. He is a very, very congenial, gregarious, friendly, humorous guy. Now, needless to say, we come from two different worlds. But we really, really have a great relationship with each other. We can talk, we can laugh, we can joke with each other and not get angry. And I have the great privilege of being able to ask him any question that I want about what the ancients believed. So I believe Zechariah 6 and verse 13 is going to be an extremely great basis for me to write my friend and say, okay, how did the ancients solve this riddle of a king and a priest being on the throne as the same person, sitting on the throne in the temple, since the throne was never in the temple, and since a king of the tribe of Judah was never allowed in the temple? How did they solve that? Since the Lord said, this is what's going to take place. How did they resolve this conundrum? So I'll do that. Hopefully, I'll have an answer for you that I can share with you come next week. Now, I don't know how the ancient Jews, how the ancient rabbis tried to solve this riddle, this puzzle. I do know how the writer of Hebrews solved the problem. And the answer to this conundrum, to this great puzzle, is known as the Melchizedecan priesthood. Now, Paul, I've always been used to saying that. Perhaps it's not Paul, but I'm not going into that discussion. Okay, so the writer of Hebrews, I'll just express it like that. And by the way, have you noticed my voice is starting to clear up a little bit? Whew, boy, that was nasty. I hope I haven't spoken too soon. But anyway, the writer of Hebrews sets out to demonstrate, oh my goodness, there's that. Yeah, I spoke too soon. Oh, that was not, oh my goodness, that's not good. Wow. Hang on, folks, let me get... put out the fire, hopefully. Okay, my apologies. So, the writer of Hebrews sets out to establish Christ as superior. The key word, the foundational word, found in the book of Hebrews is better. Christ is better. He starts off by saying Christ is better than the prophets. He is better than the angels. He is even better than Moses and the prophets. He is better through his priesthood than Abraham, than Levi, than Aaron. And he makes the case of saying, we know he's better because guess what? Even Aaron paid tithes unto Melchezedek while he was still in the loins of Abraham. And Abraham gave a tithe of everything that he had conquered from the 5 kings of the plain back in Genesis chapter 14. And so the writer sets forth the priesthood of Christ as superior to the Aaronic Levitical priesthood. He sets forth Christ as being a priest after the order of Melchizedek. Let me go over something here that I shared with you ever so briefly. Last week, that has been a cause of consternation by an awful lot of people when the subject of Christ's priesthood comes up, because it is said of Melchizedek concerning this Melchizedek, it is said that he had neither father nor mother, without genealogy, having neither beginning of days or end of days, but made like the Son of God, remains a priest forever, or a priest continually. So what we find here concerning Melchizedek, the language says, having no father, no mother, no genealogy, no beginning and no end. And it has been taken by some that this is to be taken in a very literal sense. No father, no mother, no genealogy. Well, if you have no genealogy, whatsoever, then that would be even different from Jesus, because Jesus most assuredly had a genealogy, right? But rather, what we find in a lot of the ancient writings is that it was almost a proverb to say, without mother, without father, without genealogy. And all in the world they meant by that, they did not mean that this individual was actually deity. They were not saying this man was an angel. They were not saying that this man was a spirit. What they were saying is, we don't know where he came from. We don't know who his mother and father was. We don't have any genealogical tablets to trace his lineage. And again, we don't have any record of his mother or his father. And so it's simply said of him, and as Hebrews chapter 7 points out, pardon me, he continues a priest. Well, so far as the record is concerned, back in Genesis chapter 14, we have no record whatsoever of Melchizedek dying. And so, insofar as the record is concerned, this is just a Hebraic expression, folks. He continues as a priest. Not that his priesthood was actually literally unending, but insofar as the record is concerned. This is really a prime example of needing to understand how the Hebrews express themselves, how they use idioms, how they use proverbial sayings, and what have you. Instead of taking this language absolutely literally, then we've got to see how it was being used. So, here is Christ being set forth as priest after the order of Melchizedek. And that is intrinsically a better priesthood than Aaron and Levi. To go back to Hebrews chapter 7. I might have said Hebrews chapter 5 a while ago. It's actually Hebrews chapter 7. When the writer is setting Christ forth as the superior priest to the Aaronic priesthood, he says, we know that Christ and the Melchizedekan priesthood, we know that Melchizedek himself has a greater priesthood than Aaron and Levi. And the reason we know that is because Aaron and Levi, in a manner of speaking, the writer says, paid tithes unto Melchizedek, even though they were still in the loins of Abraham. In other words, they hadn't been born yet. Even though Aaron and Levi had not yet been born, because their father Abraham submitted to Melchizedek, paid homage to Melchizedek, paid tithes to Melchizedek, then that proves that the Melchizedekan priesthood, which is the priesthood of Jesus Christ, is superior to that of Aaron and Levi. That's just the logic that is behind the Melchizedekan priesthood of Christ. Now, the argument I've got to address an objection to covenant eschatology here. It is often argued, well, the writer of Hebrews says very, very emphatically in Hebrews chapter 7, the law had been changed. And the law had to be changed in order for Christ to serve as priest. And so in Hebrews chapter 7, verse 11 and following, if perfection were through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law, what further need was there that another priest should arise according to the order of Melchezedek and not be called according to the order of Aaron? Now, look, this is stated immediately after setting forth the idea that the Melchizedek priesthood is superior to the Aaronic priesthood. Now, if you're wondering where this is going in regard to Zechariah chapter 6, you just got to hang on, okay? Because this is headed directly there. I'm not 100% positive I'm going to get to it tonight, but I'm trying to lay the groundwork for understanding how it could be possible for Christ, number one, to be a priest, and oh, by the way, even serve as a priest on earth. Let me say that again because a lot of people miss it. It was possible for Christ to serve as a priest on earth and catch the power of what I'm about to say here, and the law of Moses remain in effect. Did you catch what I just said? It was possible for Christ to serve as priest on earth while the law of Moses was still in effect. Folks, how is that possible? Historically, in the amillennial world, when arguing against dispensationalism, and the dispensationalist says that, well, in the millennium, the Aaronic priesthood will be restored. Now, a lot of them hedge about this time and say, well, no, it's not a genuine restoration of the law of Moses. It's similar to it, but not quite it. Well, I want to tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, there is not a degree of difference between how Ezekiel describes the priesthood and how the law of Moses describes the priesthood. No, it's the same. So we are told by those opposing that dispensational view that if Christ were on earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who serve and who offer the gifts according to the law. Now, the argument is made. Okay, watch this, folks. The dispensationalist says the priesthood, i.e. the Aaronic priest, the Levitical priesthood, will be restored in the millennium, and Christ will serve as priest and king on the throne in the Messianic temple, Zechariah chapter 6 and verse 13. The amillennialist and the postmillennialist responds and say, no, Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 4 refutes that, because it says if he were on earth, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the law. According to what law? Law of Moses, obviously. And so, we are told, if Christ were on earth, he could not serve as a priest in the temple. And listen to me very carefully. That's very true in regard to the services of the temple. In other words, if the law of Moses is restored, and if it's the law of the temple, then guess what? Christ can't serve as a priest in that temple, because that service would be mandated, controlled by the law of Moses. So Hebrews chapter 8 and verse 4 is correct in regard to the earthly temple, in regard to the literal temple at Jerusalem. Christ could never serve as a temple in an earthly temple in Jerusalem when the law of Moses, whether in the 1st century or in the 50th century, doesn't matter, Christ simply could not be a high priest in a Jerusalem temple regulated by the law of Moses. And you may be sitting there, and you may be going, "Oh, wait a minute, Don, you just said a moment ago that Christ could be a king and a priest on earth at the same time as the law of Moses was in effect." Well, that's right. But you see, folks, we're talking about two different temples. We are talking about two different priesthoods over and ministering in two distinctly different temples. One, an earthly, physical, geocentric temple. The other, a heavenly temple. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 8. Now, after setting forth Jesus as superior to the Aaronic Levitical priesthood, because Christ is of the Melchizedecic priesthood, the writer summarizes everything that he had to say. And by the way, we're going to spend more time, undoubtedly next week, we're going to spend more time in Hebrews chapter 7, 6 and 7, discussing the contrast between the Melchizedecic priesthood and the Aaronic priesthood, and how it is that Christ could sit as king and priest on the throne in the temple. Yeah, we're going to do that. But let me just give the summary given by the author of Hebrews himself as to how Christ could be king and priest on the throne in the temple. Remember, he's going to say in verse 4 of this very chapter, well, it couldn't be on earth under the Mosaic law in the Jerusalem temple. Couldn't do that. But he says, this is the main point of that which we are saying. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty, watch, in the heavens. Well, wait a minute. He is seated. We have a great high priest. Okay. That's the first requirement of Zechariah 6:13. He is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty, but not on earth. Not on earth. Where was this priest supposed to sit? On the throne of David. And somebody says, well, he's not on the throne of David. He won't be on the throne of David until he returns to earth. Oh, but wait, go back to the conundrum. If he comes back to earth and builds a literal physical temple in Jerusalem where the law of Moses is restored, he can't serve there. Because he's got to serve in the temple, but he's not of the tribe of Levi. And you know, this is ironic. A little bit of a digression at this particular point, but I find this so absolutely amusing. We have been told ever since the 60s. I remember this very, very well. And I shared it with you last week, so I won't go into it in detail. But I remember in the 60s being told that there were trainloads of building supplies headed for Jerusalem because it's time to rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. And do you know what they do over there? Okay, do you know what they're doing? They supposedly, and I underlined supposedly 3 times and put asterisks out behind, in front of it, behind it, because I don't believe it. I know what they claim, but I don't believe it. They are supposedly training priests to serve in this restored Jerusalem temple. Now remember, folks, this is supposed to be the temple that Jesus will rule over. Well, problem number 1, Jesus is not building that temple. And Zechariah chapter 6, verse 13, is emphatic that it would be the Messiah, it would be the branch that would build the temple. So how's that going to work? Now, what that means is that the temple that they claim to be preparing to build in Jerusalem even to this very day, it cannot be the Messianic temple because Messiah is not building it. Now, here's what you got to tell you. This is staggering. And if it's not troubling to you, it should be. All right? In the dispensational paradigm, after the church is raptured off of the earth, God, begins again to restore Israel as his people and to serve for them to serve him. But you got this troublesome thing called the tribulation. Israel signs a peace treaty with the man of sin. Now, mind you, up to the point of the rapture, the temple is not built. Okay? Up to the point of the rapture, all you have is preparation to build a temple. Okay, so after the rapture, after the church is removed from the earth, Israel signs a peace treaty with the man of sin, and the man of sin allows a temple to be rebuilt in Jerusalem. And they rebuild it. Mind you, there are a few logistical problems here. How are you going to build a temple in Jerusalem when the Al-Aqsa Dome of the Rock is there and the Muslims say, ain't happening? Number one, how do you get around that logistical issue? In order to build a temple, unless you can prove definitively that the Dome of the Rock is not sitting where the temple sat, okay, which is an interesting geographical question. But nonetheless, if you cannot prove that the temple actually was to be built and actually set at a different location than the Dome of the Rock, then you got to tear the Dome of the Rock down. Well, once again, there's a minor problem of the Islamic world. Secondly, and this is where it gets really, 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 really ironic, ladies and gentlemen. So you got this man of sin who allows Israel to build the temple. I wonder how quickly. Now remember, this is not Jesus doing this. This is not the fulfillment of Zechariah 6. Because Zechariah 6 has the Messiah, the branch of the Lord, building this temple. So it's Israel building the temple. So you have to ask yourself the question, how long would it take Israel to rebuild the Herodian temple? How long do you really honestly think it would take? Well, in the first century, it took Herod the Great and Israel years and years and years and years. As a matter of fact, now listen very carefully. The main structure, the main glorious structure, was completed. In the time of Jesus. However, there was actually, according to Josephus, there was actually ongoing construction around the temple complex all the way until what? 64 to 65 AD. And if you'll remember in John chapter 2, where Jesus was in the temple and he made that stunning statement, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it up again. But of course, he was speaking of the temple of his body. But the Jews responded by saying, 46 years has this temple been under construction. And you say, you'll raise it up in 3 days? No wonder they thought he was crazy. They totally misunderstood. So, the Jews said, in 33 AD, 30 AD. This is at the beginning of his ministry. The Jews said the temple had been under construction 46 years. Okay. So we know they didn't have modern technology. We know they didn't have the very best of equipment. We know that the incredibly labor-intensive method of building. I mean, listen, folks, do you realize that some of the construction stones, some of the foundational stones of the temple at Jerusalem are among some of the largest architectural stones found anywhere in the world? Now, they're not the largest, but they are some of the largest. That's staggering. How were they able to move those things? Well, they had to quarry them, and the quarry was not in Jerusalem proper, so they had to move them. Okay. All of that said, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but it's important. All of that said, let's just grant that today, okay, you got massive cranes. You got massive quarry equipment. You got massive trucks. I don't know if you've ever seen some of the humongous trucks that they use in some of the mines around the world, but a person standing next to one of the tires of one of those trucks, I mean, the dude looks like he's an inch tall. Those trucks are unbelievably huge. Okay, so let's grant the technological advance of building materials, building equipment, overall technology. How long would it take to build a temple? Well, I suspect, and I'm not an architect, I'm not any kind of a construction guy, but I suspect, ladies and gentlemen, it would take 3.5 years. Now, we are told, Thomas Ice says, in his book, Prophecy Watch, that he co-wrote with Timothy to me, he said that in that rebuilt temple, now remember, that's supposedly the temple that they're gathering materials for right now in the land of Israel. Okay? So right now, they're supposedly gathering the materials, and so we are told they're ready to rebuild. How long would it take to build? But again, it's not Jesus doing the building. It's the man of sin authorizing it. Folks, that's not the Messianic temple. Point number 3, they say that they're training men of the tribe of Levi, of the Kohen family, Cohen. How do they know that? They don't have any genealogies. There is not a genealogical tablet in the world that can demonstrate that anyone today is of the Kohen family. That's strictly by word of mouth. That's strictly oral tradition. It is unprovable. And they say, oh, we have DNA tests. Well, what are your DNA tests based on? You see the problem? Okay, listen, folks, we're out of time. Join us again next week as I go deeper and deeper into the Messianic temple, Zechariah chapter 6, verse 13, and the Messianic temple. Thanks for joining me. Good night, and God bless.
Thank you for joining the Two Guys in a Bible radio broadcast. On behalf of Dunn Preston and myself, we'd like to say, have a very pleasant day, and may God bless. Until next time, we'll see you on Fulfill Radio, a voice you can trust.